going to be pouring this mold, which pours 2 large and 2 small sort of disc or lintel type beads. As you can see, the holes in it are not terribly large, but they're larger than the hole which you expect in your bead at the end of the day. First we're going to band the mold so it stays together. Then we're going to pour, and we want to pour so that it goes down the side of the mold and doesn't clog the hole. I'm going to tilt this so you can see it happening here. We're pouring with a syringe so that we can get a thin stream so that it won't clog that hole. Now as it sets, you want to keep the hole full so that you can tell the thickness of the casting in the hole. If you keep it filled up as it sinks down, you'll be able to tell the approximate thickness of the bead, just like you can in this one here. You can see the thickness here as it's sunk down. Now this one is ready to drain, but we'll keep this one going so that we can tell how thick they're getting as they go. Okay, our mold is almost ready to drain. You can see how I've kept it full, and you can see approximately the thickness that's built up inside the mold. Now to drain it, I use a couple of things. I use this item, which is just a needle tool that's used in lace draping and various things like that. But I use it to make sure that the hole is open large enough in order to drain it. I also use this, which is attached to a simple aquarium pump. This is a small glue tip, and this is your micro tubing and an attachment for the micro tubing, which fits right onto the glue tip. Now this aids you in getting the slip out of these small hole molds. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this needle tool down there and spin it around just to make sure there's a big enough hole to get that glue tip into. Then I'm going to insert the glue tip into the hole and evacuate the slip from the hole. It comes right out, as you can see. And if you look, you will now see that where we had a big hole before, we don't have any hole. We have a small enough hole that it's going to be a good size for our finished bead. Now this is a smaller bead mold. It pours 10 beads that after firing in porcelain will come out about 10 millimeters. And you may by this time be asking yourself, are you going to pour those hollow as well? And if so, why? Why wouldn't you just pour them solid? Well, there's a couple of reasons for pouring beads hollow. One is, especially with the larger beads, they're lighter in weight. And also, if you try to pour a large bead such as the previous mold solid, a lot of times they will collapse. Now with this one, we're going to pour them the same as we did the first mold that I showed you. But in this case, we're not going to pour them super thin because we don't want them to be fragile. But it is handy for them to not be totally solid either, because we're going to have a hole clear through them when we get done because of the way I pour them, and all we have to do is enlarge that hole slightly in order to have them ready to string. So with these, what we're going to do is we fill it up once, have it good and full so they're just slightly rounded over the top, and then instead of keeping that full throughout the entire casting, we're going to let that sink down. And when it sinks down to the point where there's just a slight hole in the top of each one, then we're going to flip the mold over so that the remaining slip that's in there will come over to the pour hole side, and we'll have a more even casting. We won't have beads that are little rocks on one side and thin on the other. This will make it so that they're evenly cast all the way around, but yeah, we're not going to drain them. So we'll have an even cast bead. It'll be slightly hollow in the center, and when we're done, we'll have a hole that's all the way through, but probably needs to be enlarged before we actually fire them. Okay, as you can see, this mold that we poured a few minutes ago is got the little holes on most of them. Holes are clear through now. What that means is that the slip has gone below the top of the pour hole, but the thing is pretty much full of slip still. So we're going to use the needle tool again, and we're going to go right down the center till we feel the mold on the other side. This sort of pre-drills our hole. We'll be doing that again, but that gets it open, and then we're going to turn it over. Now that will hold all the slip that's currently in the mold towards the side of the pour hole. It'll take it a couple minutes to, roll down there, but it'll sort of sit there. And now we can pour the second side of the mold. So we're going to do that the same way. And while this side is setting up on the top, the other side is finishing by putting the slip back up against the pour hole. Once it drops below the pour hole, then the top side doesn't really have any slip against it, but the bottom side is still gaining slip. So this way it makes it a more even casting. Now when you turn the mold over for the second time, you want to again check the holes on the first side to make sure they're all open. The reason you want to do this is because if there is a trapped airspace, sometimes it will make the bead collapse. So then we're going to just let them sit until it's time to take them out of the mold, because this is the second side. They're basically all done. We'll go through piercing the holes in them again before we take them out. That way we're sure we have a nice uniform even hole all the way through the bead. And then once they're dry, we can enlarge that with a drill. Okay, this is a smaller mold, and you want to hold the mold together when you do this, because these will be nearly solid. This pours about an 8mm bead, and since they're almost solid, when you push the needling pin through, you can sometimes spread the mold if they're more or less solid. You'll find a little bit more resistance in going through these holes, again because they're almost solid, and again it's very helpful to have that hole through the bead as a starter hole. You can see there where there was a little bit excess in this mold, and it did come out the other hole, and which is again good reason to go back and re-needle them. Okay, the beads are ready to remove from the mold. So the first thing I'm going to do is to go back into the holes just to make sure that these are all the way through. Just press gently down till you feel the hardness of the actual mold, and you want to squeeze the mold together so that you don't spread it. Just gently do that in each one of them. This gives you that first starting hole all the way through, which makes it much easier to enlarge it later. And we're going to take off the bands and open the mold. Then I just simply cut off the spares with an X-Acto knife. And remove the beads from the mold. You can see that they have a little hole in the end of them, and I'm going to cut this one apart so that you can see how they are inside, which is not something you would normally be doing, but we'll do that just to show you what they're like. These are the 10mm beads. So you can see that they're very evenly cast, and that there's a hole completely through the center of them. But they're not solid, but they are even all the way across, and they're pretty close to solid with this size. Larger beads will have a bigger hole, obviously, in the middle, and but they'll all still be about 1/8 of an inch thick if you do it like this.